What would you do if the person you loved most betrayed you? Would you fight back or walk away? Could you stay calm while your world collapsed? Vincent Crawford faced these impossible questions when his wife walked through the door with another man's family, demanding everything he'd built. His answer shocked everyone. Before we move on, tell me in the comments which state you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode might be connected to your story. Vincent Crawford was 38 years old and had spent the last 12 years building his reputation as one of Philadelphia's most respected African-American architects. He specialized in community revitalization projects and sustainable urban design, work that had earned him multiple awards and a client list he'd cultivated through careful relationship building and flawless execution. Now he stood at his bay window, watching 3 vehicles pull into his driveway on a quiet Tuesday evening. His wife Simone emerged from the lead SUV, followed by Devin Pierce, a contractor she'd claimed was just a business contact. Behind them came an older woman and a younger man carrying a briefcase. Simone used her key to open the front door. They entered without knocking, 4 people walking into his renovated brownstone like they owned it. Devin hung his jacket on the coat rack. The older woman looked around the living room with calculating eyes. The younger man set his briefcase on the dining table. "Honey, we're home," Simone announced, her voice artificially sweet. Vincent remained seated in his leather armchair. He'd spent the last 2 weeks preparing for this exact moment. On the coffee table in front of him sat a brown leather portfolio containing documents none of them knew existed. "Vincent, baby, I want you to meet some very important people," Simone said. "This is Gloria Pierce, Devin's mother, and this is Terrence, his brother. They've become like family to me these past few months." Gloria stepped forward with the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. "Now, Vincent," she said, "we all need to sit down and discuss some important changes that need to happen tonight." Terrence opened his briefcase and removed a stack of documents, arranging them on the dining table with deliberate precision. Vincent recognized what they were immediately: transfer documents, power of attorney forms, and various agreements designed to hand over control of Crawford Architecture LLC to these people who had contributed nothing to building it. Devin adjusted the thermostat and dimmed the lights as if he lived there. "Nice place you got here, Marcus. Real nice. Must have cost a pretty penny." Terrence produced an expensive pen from his jacket pocket and placed it next to the signature lines on the documents. The message was clear. They expected Vincent to sign everything tonight. Vincent stood slowly and picked up his leather portfolio. Inside were documents he'd been preparing while Simone was supposedly visiting her sick aunt in Baltimore 3 weeks ago. During that time, he'd hired a forensic accountant, consulted with his attorney Rebecca Chen, and taken steps to protect everything he'd built. He looked directly at Simone. His voice stayed calm and quiet when he spoke. "Honey, you're already too late." The room fell silent. Simone's confident smile faltered. Devin leaned forward in his chair, his casual demeanor shifting to something sharper. Gloria's calculating gaze narrowed. Terrence's pen froze halfway to the signature line. They expected shock, panic, maybe anger. They hadn't expected this calm certainty that suggested their entire plan had a fatal flaw they hadn't anticipated. 2 months earlier, Vincent had been working late in his home office when he reached for the tablet he and Simone shared. He needed to review some architectural renderings, but the device opened to her email instead. What he saw made his stomach drop. The correspondence was between Simone and a Baltimore property development firm. There were consultation fee invoices, property evaluation requests, and detailed discussions about launching a competing architectural practice. The emails mentioned Devin Pierce repeatedly, along with references to leveraging existing client relationships and utilizing established reputation. Simone had told Vincent she was visiting her sick Aunt Martha in Baltimore for 3 weeks, but these emails painted a very different picture of what she was actually doing there. Vincent sat in silence for 20 minutes, reading every message. The scheme was sophisticated. The Pierce family planned to use his name, his client list, and his professional reputation to establish their own firm. They needed access to his business accounts, his intellectual property, and most importantly, his signature on documents that would make it all legal. The next morning, Vincent called Maya, his older sister, and a corporate attorney. He didn't tell Simone. He simply said he needed advice on asset protection for the firm. "What's going on, Vince?" Maya asked immediately. She could always read him. "I need a forensic accountant," he said, "and I need you to recommend the best business attorney you know." Maya didn't ask questions. She gave him 2 names. By that afternoon, Vincent had hired both. The forensic accountant, a meticulous woman named Dr. Patricia Holmes, spent a week analyzing Crawford Architecture LLC's financial records. What she found confirmed Vincent's worst fears. Simone had been using the firm's credit lines to fund consultation fees with the Pierce family's development company. She'd charged thousands of dollars in expenses, software purchases, rendering services, even office space deposits, all for a competing venture Vincent knew nothing about. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Holmes said during their meeting, "these transactions show a clear pattern of diversion. Your wife has been systematically preparing to launch a rival firm using your business resources." Vincent met with Rebecca Chen the same week. Rebecca was a business attorney with 25 years of experience and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when protecting her clients. "How much time do we have?" Rebecca asked after reviewing the evidence. "Simone comes back from Baltimore in 2 weeks, Vincent said. "Then we have 2 weeks to dismantle everything she's planning to steal," Rebecca replied. They worked quickly and quietly. Rebecca filed paperwork to dissolve Crawford Architecture LLC under Delaware corporate law, citing irreconcilable differences between managing partners. She transferred all intellectual property, designs, client contracts, proprietary software into a new protected trust that required dual consent for any withdrawals. Vincent closed the business accounts and opened new ones in his name alone. He terminated the office lease and secured the security deposits. He transferred domain names to a holding company. He documented every single transaction with timestamps and legal justifications. The prenuptial agreement Simone had reluctantly signed 3 years ago contained a fraud protection clause that Rebecca had insisted on including. Vincent thought it was overkill at the time. Now it was his insurance policy. If either party attempts to manipulate shared assets through deception or misrepresentation, the innocent party gains full protection of all assets plus legal fees. Your wife's unauthorized use of business credit for her Baltimore scheme triggered this clause automatically. By the time Simone returned from her trick, Crawford Architecture LLC no longer existed. Every asset had been legally transferred, protected, and documented. Vincent had built a fortress around everything he'd worked for, and he'd done it using the same meticulous attention to detail that made him an excellent architect. He just had to wait for her next move. Back in the present moment, Vincent opened his leather portfolio and pulled out a single document. He placed it on the dining table where everyone could see the official letterhead and legal stamps. Crawford Architecture LLC was officially dissolved 3 days ago, Vincent said quietly. The assets were liquidated and transferred to an escrow trust that requires both parties' consent for any withdrawals. Simone's face went white as she read the document. Her lips moved silently, trying to comprehend what this meant. The joint checking account that had funded her Baltimore vacation, the business credit cards, the merchant accounts, all of it had been systematically dismantled while she was planning this confrontation. Devin's chair scraped against the hardwood floor as he stood abruptly. "You can't just dissolve a business without your wife's consent," he snapped, his voice rising. "That's illegal. That's financial abuse." "Actually," Vincent replied, his tone remaining frustratingly calm, "under Delaware corporate law and our operating agreement, either managing partner can initiate dissolution procedures in cases of irreconcilable differences or breach of fiduciary duty." He pulled out another document showing the registered agent notifications and state filing confirmations. The business bank accounts were closed yesterday. The domain names were transferred to a holding company this morning. Even the office lease was terminated and the security deposits released. Each revelation hit them like a physical blow. Gloria Pierce's calculating expression shifted to something closer to panic. Terence quietly began packing his documents back into his briefcase, clearly recognizing their strategy had failed. Simone grabbed Vincent's arm with desperate fingers. "Marcus, please, you don't understand. This isn't what you think it is. I was trying to protect us, to secure our future." Her voice took on the pleading tone she used when she wanted sympathy. "I know how this looks, but Devin and his family have been helping me figure out how to make our money work better for us. This vacation, it was research, baby. Market research." The lies came faster now, tumbling over each other in desperation. Gloria stood slowly, her earlier authority replaced with cold calculation. "Mr. Crawford," she said, her voice taking on a dangerous edge, "I think you're making a very serious mistake here. My family has worked very hard to get where we are. Sometimes opportunities arise that require creative partnerships. Your wife understood that." Terence leaned back in his chair with a smile that made Vincent's skin crawl. "You know, maybe you should think about what's best for everyone here. We're not just talking about money anymore. We're talking about family reputation, about what happens when people find out you abandoned your wife when she needed you most." Vincent recognized the threat for what it was, the beginning of a public relations campaign designed to destroy his professional reputation. Then Gloria made her critical error. "You need that money to close on the condo in Baltimore," she said, frustration overriding her careful planning. "My son has been waiting for this opportunity." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Gloria's hand flew to her mouth as if she could somehow pull the words back, but it was too late. This wasn't about Simone finding happiness with Devin. This was about using Vincent as a financial stepping stone for the Pierce family's real estate ambitions. His wife had been their willing accomplice from the beginning. "Your son," Vincent repeated, his voice deliberately neutral. He watched panic spread across their faces. Simone looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "It's not what you think," she stammered. "Yes, we looked at some properties while we were there, but it was for us, baby, for our future together." Devin found his voice, but the smooth confidence was gone. "Look, Marcus, my mother misspoke. What she meant was—" Gloria cut him off with a sharp look. The family dynamic was becoming clear. Devin wasn't the mastermind. He was just another tool in his mother's larger financial strategy. "No, Devin," Gloria said, her voice regaining some authority. "Mr. Crawford is clearly more perceptive than we gave him credit for. Perhaps it's time for complete honesty." She turned to Vincent. "My family has worked very hard to get where we are. Sometimes opportunities arise that require creative partnerships. Your wife understood that." Vincent leaned back in his chair, finally allowing himself a small smile. "So, the Baltimore vacation was actually a mortgage application meeting. You needed my income documentation, my credit profile, probably my tax returns to qualify for financing." Simone's pale face confirmed everything. "And tonight's signature party was supposed to give you legal access to everything you needed to complete the purchase." Within 48 hours, Simone launched a carefully orchestrated social media campaign. Her Instagram profile, which had showcased their seemingly perfect marriage, transformed overnight into a testimony of victimhood and financial abuse. The first post showed Simone looking tearful and vulnerable, with a caption about finally finding the courage to speak her truth. She wrote about a controlling husband who had systematically isolated her from family and friends, manipulated their finances to keep her dependent, and finally snapped when she tried to assert her independence. The comments section filled with sympathetic responses from friends who had no idea they were getting a carefully edited version of reality. Vincent received his first concerned call at 7 in the morning from a business partner who had been contacted by friends of the family, expressing worry about Vincent's mental state and his recent erratic financial decisions. By noon, his assistant had forwarded 3 emails from clients who had received anonymous tips about his ongoing domestic issues and their potential impact on his professional reliability. The Pierce family had clearly done their homework. They were systematically poisoning every important relationship in his professional and personal networks, using just enough truth to make their lies believable. Vincent sat in his temporary office reviewing the stack of legal documents Rebecca Chen had prepared. His sister, Maya, arrived at 3 o'clock, carrying her laptop and an expression of fierce protectiveness. "I've been documenting everything," Maya said, opening a folder filled with screenshots. "Every post, every comment, every anonymous email. She's building a narrative, but she's also creating a permanent record of false statements we can use against her." Maya showed him Simone's latest Instagram story, a tearful video where she claimed Vincent had cut off all her access to money and forced her to rely on the kindness of friends. The timestamp showed it was posted at 2:47 p.m., just hours after Vincent had documentation proving she'd spent $4,000 on designer clothes the previous week, using an account she claimed didn't exist. "She's not very good at this," Maya observed. "She's contradicting herself every few hours." Vincent's phone buzzed with another call from a colleague. This was the 5th one that morning. He let it go to voicemail. Rebecca called at 4:30. "We just had a visit from Detective Rodriguez. Apparently, someone filed a police report alleging you committed financial crimes by dissolving the business without Simone's consent." Vincent felt his jaw tighten, but Rebecca's tone was almost amused. "The detective spent exactly 12 minutes reviewing your documentation before recommending the complaint be handled through civil court rather than criminal proceedings. He told me off the record that it was one of the most well-documented asset protection cases he'd ever seen." She paused. "He's writing a report stating no criminal activity occurred. That's going to be valuable when this goes to mediation." By evening, Vincent and Maya had compiled a comprehensive counter-narrative. Bank records showing Simone's independent access to multiple accounts, email chains proving her involvement in the Baltimore scheme, credit card statements documenting her luxury spending during the time she claimed to be financially abused, metadata analysis showing she had backdated several threatening emails Vincent had supposedly sent, creating them days after he'd already filed the dissolution papers. "She handed us everything we need," Maya said, scrolling through the evidence. "Every post, every lie, every false claim, it's all time-stamped and documented." Rebecca filed for emergency mediation through Pennsylvania's business court system that night. Her strategy was elegant in its simplicity: force everyone into a controlled environment where emotion couldn't override evidence, where Simone's public victimhood narrative would be tested against actual documentation. The mediation request included a comprehensive timeline of events, bank records showing the legitimate dissolution process, screenshots of social media posts that contradicted the financial abuse allegations, and the detective's report clearing Vincent of criminal wrongdoing. Within 2 hours, they received confirmation that mediation had been scheduled for the following Tuesday. Vincent stood at his office window, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. The Pierce family had turned his life into a public spectacle, but they'd made one critical error in their calculation. While they were busy building their public relations campaign, Vincent had been building something much more substantial, an evidentiary record that would stand up in any legal proceeding. His phone chimed with a text from Maya. "They started a war with receipts. Big mistake." Rebecca Chen's conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Rittenhouse Square, but Vincent barely noticed the view. His attention was focused on the evidence spread across the mahogany table, months of financial manipulation documented in excruciating detail. Dr. Patricia Holmes, the forensic accountant, presented her findings with clinical precision. Between March and June of last year, Mrs. Crawford used business credit lines to fund 12 separate consultations with Pierce Development Corporation. The total came to $47,000. She slid a detailed spreadsheet across the table. Architectural rendering software purchases, office space deposits in Baltimore, website development fees, business registration costs, all charged to Crawford Architecture LLC accounts for a competing venture Mr. Crawford knew nothing about. Rebecca made notes on her legal pad. "And these transactions occurred while Mrs. Crawford had independent access to personal accounts with sufficient funds?" "Correct," Dr. Holmes confirmed. Mrs. Crawford maintained 3 personal credit cards and 2 checking accounts in her name alone, with combined balances exceeding $60,000 during this period. The business charges were unnecessary and unauthorized. Vincent reviewed the timeline Dr. Holmes had constructed. It showed a clear pattern. Simone's Baltimore trips had started small, weekend visits she claimed were to see her aunt. Then they'd grown longer and more frequent, always coinciding with property development meetings and mortgage consultation appointments. "The prenuptial agreement is the key," Rebecca said, pulling out the document Simone had signed 3 years earlier. Section 7, subsection D. If either party attempts to manipulate shared assets through deception, fraud, or misrepresentation for personal gain, the innocent party gains full protection of all marital and business assets, plus reasonable legal fees incurred in defense of said assets. She looked up at Vincent. "Your wife's unauthorized use of business accounts for the Baltimore scheme triggered this clause the moment she made the first charge. Everything that happened after that, the social media campaign, the police report, the anonymous contacts, just adds to the evidence of bad faith." Maya entered the conference room carrying her laptop. "I've got the metadata analysis back on those emails Simone posted, the ones she claims show Vincent threatening to cut off her money." She opened a file and turned her screen toward them. These emails were created on June 15th, 3 days after Vincent filed the corporate dissolution papers. Either Simone is psychic or she fabricated evidence and didn't realize we could check the timestamps. Rebecca's smile was sharp. That's fraud, potentially criminal fraud if she presented these to the police as genuine evidence. Vincent had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he spoke. "What about the Pierce family's involvement? Can we prove they knew this was unauthorized?" Dr. Holmes nodded. "The email correspondence shows Devin Pierce and Gloria Pierce were both copied on invoices that explicitly referenced Crawford Architecture business credit line. They knew exactly where the money was coming from." Rebecca began organizing documents for the mediation. "We're going to present this in 3 phases. First, we established that Mrs. Crawford had independent financial access throughout the marriage, destroying her isolation narrative. Second, we show the unauthorized business charges and the Baltimore scheme. Third, we demonstrate the fraud protection clause in the prenuptial agreement was triggered, making all subsequent claims void." She pulled out a tablet and showed them the mediation platform interface. "I'm uploading everything tonight. By law, all parties have to receive the evidence 48 hours before mediation. I want them to see exactly what they're up against." Maya leaned back in her chair. "They're going to panic when they see this." "Good," Rebecca said. "Panic leads to mistakes, and we need them making mistakes on the record." Vincent's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He put it on speaker. Simone's voice filled the room, shaky and desperate. "Vincent, baby, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. The Pierce family, they're not who I thought they were. They've been pressuring me to do things, to say things that aren't true." Vincent recognized the manipulation immediately. She'd used this exact tone when she wanted him to forgive her smaller betrayals over the years. "Simone," he said calmly, "I'll see you at mediation on Tuesday. Rebecca will be sending you the formal notice tomorrow morning." He paused. "And Simone, bring your own attorney. You're going to need one." The line went quiet, then disconnected. Rebecca gathered the documents into organized folders. "The mediation is in 4 days. Between now and then, I expect they'll try everything to avoid facing this evidence in an official proceeding." She was right. Over the next 3 days, Vincent received calls from Gloria Pierce offering to work something out privately, texts from Devin suggesting they move past this misunderstanding, and even a message from Terrence implying that things could get unnecessarily complicated if Vincent insisted on mediation. Vincent forwarded every message to Rebecca, adding them to the evidence file. By Monday night, the case was airtight. Tuesday morning, everyone would see exactly how thoroughly they'd underestimated the architect who built his entire career on careful planning and flawless execution. Maya arrived at Vincent's temporary office Tuesday morning, carrying coffee and a protective energy that had gotten her through medical school and law school. She'd taken the day off from her corporate firm to be present for whatever happened next. "Half our family thinks you've lost your mind," she said, setting the cups down. "The other half wants to know if you need bail money. Aunt Sharon called me 3 times yesterday asking if you'd really cut Simone off without any money." Vincent shook his head. "Simone posted a photo yesterday shopping at Nordstrom. She's not exactly struggling." Maya pulled up Simone's Instagram on her phone. The posts were a masterclass in contradiction. Tearful videos about financial abuse posted at 9 in the morning, followed by photos of expensive brunches and designer shopping bags in the afternoon. Stories about being abandoned and alone, immediately followed by check-ins at luxury spas with supportive friends. "She's her own worst enemy," Maya said. "Every post undermines the previous one. Look at this. Yesterday she claimed you drained all the accounts and left her penniless. Today she's posting about her new Gucci bag." Vincent reviewed the mediation documents one final time. Rebecca had organized everything into clear sections: financial independence evidence, unauthorized business charges, Baltimore scheme documentation, prenuptial fraud clause activation, and false claims analysis. "The prenup was your insurance policy," Maya said, reading over his shoulder. "I remember when Simone signed it. She complained it was unromantic, but she didn't actually read it." "Section 7, subsection D," Vincent said. "Rebecca insisted on including fraud protection. I thought it was excessive at the time." Maya smiled. "Never excessive when dealing with other people's money. The clause is crystal clear. Any attempt to manipulate shared assets through deception triggers automatic protection for the innocent party. Simone, using business credit for the Baltimore real estate scheme, activated it the moment she made the first charge." She pulled up a document on her laptop. "I've been tracking every social media post, every public statement, every anonymous contact to your business partners. There's a clear pattern of defamation and harassment that goes beyond just divorce drama." The spreadsheet showed dates, times, platforms, and content summaries. Maya had categorized each post by type: financial abuse claims, isolation allegations, mental health insinuations, business reliability questions. This isn't just messy divorce behavior. This is a coordinated campaign to destroy your professional reputation. The Pierce family has been methodical about it. They're hitting your business contacts, your clients, your professional networks. They want you financially ruined even if they can't access your assets directly. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Court in 2 hours. Pierce family just requested postponement. Request denied. See you there." Maya stood and gathered her materials. Let's go watch them face the consequences of underestimating an architect who builds everything on solid foundations. The drive to the courthouse was quiet. Vincent felt oddly calm despite everything hanging in the balance. He'd spent 2 months preparing for this moment, and he'd done it the right way. Documented, legal, defensible. Maya glanced at him from the passenger seat. "You know what I admire most about how you've handled this? You didn't try to destroy them, you just protected yourself and let their own actions speak for themselves. I'm not interested in revenge, I just want this finished. That's the difference between you and them. They wanted to take everything you built, you just want to preserve what's yours and move on." They arrived at the courthouse with 30 minutes to spare. Rebecca met them in the lobby, carrying 2 briefcases full of documentation. Simone just arrived with a court-appointed legal aid attorney. He looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. Devin's here, too, playing the supportive boyfriend role. Gloria Pierce is notably absent. Smart move on her part, given that her accidental confession is on the record. Rebecca checked her watch. Mediator Richard Hayes is known for running a tight ship. No emotional outbursts, no theatrics, just evidence and facts. It's the perfect environment for our case. Maya squeezed Vincent's shoulder. "Whatever happens in there, you did everything right. You protected yourself legally, ethically, and professionally. That's all anyone can do." A court official opened the mediation room door and called them inside. Vincent took a deep breath and walked forward, ready to face the final reckoning of a marriage that had been built on foundations he didn't know were already crumbling. Richard Hayes had the weathered authority of someone who'd spent 30 years listening to people lie about money. He opened the mediation by explaining the rules. Evidence-based discussion, no interruptions, and each party would present their position in turn. Simone sat across from Vincent, her court-appointed attorney looking increasingly uncomfortable as he shuffled through papers. Devon had been relegated to the observer section after Rebecca successfully argued he had no legal standing in what was fundamentally a marital dispute. Hayes turned to Simone first. "Mrs. Crawford, you've filed claims of financial abuse and improper dissolution of marital assets. Please present your position." Simone had clearly prepared for this moment. She wore a simple navy dress and minimal makeup, a stark contrast to her usual designer wardrobe. When she spoke, her voice trembled with practiced emotion. "Mr. Hayes, I've been married to Vincent for 6 years. During that time, he made every major financial decision without consulting me. I wasn't allowed access to our business accounts or any real say in how our money was managed." She pulled out bank statements that showed only Vincent's name on the primary business accounts. "When I finally found the courage to seek some independence, he punished me by dissolving our business and cutting off all my access to our shared resources." Her attorney nodded along, clearly believing his client's version of events. Simone dabbed at her eyes with tissues that seemed to appear from nowhere. "I've been financially dependent on Vincent our entire marriage," she continued. "And the moment I tried to build something for myself, he destroyed everything we'd worked for together." Hayes listened without expression, then turned to Vincent. "Mr. Crawford, your response." Vincent opened his portfolio and began laying documents on the table with methodical precision. He didn't speak immediately. He let the evidence speak first. Bank records showing Simone's 3 personal credit cards and 2 checking accounts. Corporate filings demonstrating her equal status as managing partner. Email chains revealing her communications with Baltimore mortgage brokers. Credit card statements showing $47,000 in charges to business accounts for Pierce Development consultations. Mrs. Crawford had independent access to significant financial resources throughout our marriage, Vincent said quietly. She was a managing partner with full signing authority on business accounts. She maintained personal credit lines and checking accounts I never controlled or even accessed. Hayes picked up the bank statements, comparing them to Simone's earlier claims. His expression shifted from neutral to skeptical. "Mrs. Crawford," Hayes said, "these records show you had independent access to over $60,000 in personal accounts during the time period when you claim to have been financially isolated. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Simone's confident facade cracked. "Those accounts, those were from before Vincent became suspicious. He didn't know about my trip to Baltimore until after I'd already committed to it." But Hayes was already comparing dates. "According to these records, the Baltimore charges occurred after Mr. Crawford filed for business dissolution, yet you're claiming he used the dissolution to punish you for seeking independence." He looked directly at Simone with steady eyes that had seen every manipulation tactic. "If your husband was trying to financially isolate you, why were you using business credit cards for real estate consultations during this same time period?" The question hung in the air. Devon shifted uncomfortably in the observer section, realizing Simone's answer would determine everything. Simone's voice lost all pretense of victimhood. "The Baltimore trip was research. I was exploring investment opportunities that would benefit both Marcus and myself." Her attorney's face fell. She just undermined her entire position. Rebecca leaned forward. "Mr. Hayes, these mortgage consultation fees were paid using business accounts that Mrs. Crawford now claims were used to isolate her financially. The emails show she discussed using Mr. Crawford's income documentation for loan pre-approval without his knowledge or consent." Hayes made notes on his legal pad. "Mrs. Crawford, you've presented a narrative about financial abuse and isolation, but the evidence shows you had independent access to substantial funds, used business resources for unauthorized real estate ventures, and only claimed abuse after your husband discovered these activities and protected the remaining assets." He gestured to the timeline Rebecca had prepared.
The corporate dissolution appears to have been a defensive measure, not a punitive one. Simone's attorney requested a brief recess. Through the glass partition, Vincent watched them engage in what appeared to be a heated discussion about legal strategy and realistic outcomes. When they returned, the attorney's opening statement was pure legal capitulation dressed as negotiation. My client is prepared to accept a clean separation of assets according to the terms outlined in the original prenuptial agreement. She withdraws any claims to the dissolved business assets and acknowledges that the protective measures taken by Mr. Crawford were legally appropriate. Hayes turned to Rebecca. Ms. Chen, my client accepts Mrs. Crawford's withdrawal of claims and requests that all parties acknowledge the legitimacy of the asset protection measures in the final agreement. The formal language felt anticlimactic after the drama of the past 2 weeks, but Vincent understood this moment represented more than just legal resolution. It was the end of a marriage built on foundations that had been compromised from the start. As Simone signed the separation agreement with shaking hands, Vincent felt something close to relief. Not triumph, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd protected what he'd built without compromising his integrity in the process.
The parking garage beneath the business court was dimly lit and nearly empty, fluorescent bulbs humming overhead. Vincent was walking toward his car when he heard footsteps echoing behind him, the distinctive click of Simone's heels on concrete. He turned to find her standing 20 feet away, no longer flanked by attorneys or the Pierce family. Just a woman who had gambled everything on a strategy that had backfired completely. "Vincent, please," she said, her voice carrying none of the calculated emotion from the mediation room, just raw exhaustion and something that might have been genuine regret. "I know you have every right to hate me, but I need you to understand that this wasn't supposed to happen like this." She moved closer, her hands gesturing in the animated way that had once been charming. "The Pierce family made it sound so simple, so reasonable. They said you'd never even notice the changes, that we could all benefit from working together." Vincent leaned against his car, studying the woman he'd married 6 years ago. "Simone, you signed illegal documents without reading them. You used our business accounts to fund real estate speculation with people you'd known for 6 months. You filed false police reports and defamed me on social media." Each accusation was delivered without heat, just facts laid out like evidence in a case already decided. None of that happened because you were confused or manipulated. It happened because you made choices. Tears streamed down her face, but Vincent found himself unmoved by a display that had once been guaranteed to break his resolve. "I thought I loved Devin. I thought his family cared about me, that they saw something in me you had stopped seeing." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But when everything started falling apart, when they realized there wasn't going to be any money, they dropped me like I was nothing." The bitterness in her voice was sharp. Vincent realized she was only now beginning to understand how completely she'd been used. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and held it out to her. "The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow morning. The terms are exactly what we agreed to in mediation. You keep your personal accounts and your car. I keep the business assets and the house." The envelope felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the finality of legal dissolution. "Your attorney can review everything, but there won't be any surprises. I'm not interested in revenge, Simone. I'm interested in closure." She took the envelope with shaking hands. "What happens now? Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" The questions revealed the depth of her dependence on others to define her path, a pattern that had led her from Vincent's protection directly into the Pierce family's exploitation. You figure out who you are when nobody else is writing your script. You learn to make decisions based on what you actually want instead of what other people convince you to want. He paused, studying her face in the harsh fluorescent light. "And you accept that actions have consequences. The Pierce family used you, you used me. Everyone made choices, and now everyone lives with the results." Simone looked down at the envelope in her hands. "I'm sorry,"
she said quietly. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry." Vincent opened his car door. "I believe you, but sorry doesn't change anything. It just means you understand what you did wrong." He got in the car and started the engine. Through the window, he could see Simone standing alone in the vast parking garage, holding the envelope that represented the end of everything they'd built together. "From now on, Simone, you're responsible for your own choices," he said through the open window, "and I'm no longer your safety net." He drove away without looking back, leaving her in the shadows with the consequences of decisions that seemed so simple when Gloria Pierce had first whispered promises of wealth and independence into her willing ear. The exit ramp led him up into afternoon sunlight, and Vincent realized he felt lighter than he had in months. Not happy exactly, but free. Free from manipulation, from betrayal, from the constant weight of someone else's schemes. The divorce would be final in 90 days. The mediation agreement was ironclad. The evidence was documented and filed. It was finished. Vincent drove toward his temporary office, already thinking about the next chapter, the one where he rebuilt his practice on foundations that couldn't be compromised, where trust would be earned rather than assumed, where the only person who could sabotage his success was himself. Behind him, in the parking garage's dim light, Simone opened the envelope and began reading the formal legal language that would sever their marriage permanently. The papers were clear, precise, and utterly final, just like the architect who had drafted them.
5 months later, Vincent stood in his new office overlooking Philadelphia's harbor, watching cargo ships navigate channels that had been dredged deeper to accommodate modern commerce. The view reminded him that adaptation was survival, that what looked like destruction was sometimes just renovation. Crawford Consulting had emerged from the ashes of his dissolved partnerships stronger and more focused. He'd taken on 3 new clients who appreciated his methodical approach to risk management and asset protection. The irony wasn't lost on him. His personal disaster had become his professional specialty. The office space was smaller than his old firm, but carefully designed. Open floor plan with clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a conference room where he could meet clients without the ghosts of past betrayals hovering in corners. He'd built this space deliberately, with the same attention to foundations that had saved him during the divorce. Maya knocked on the doorframe, carrying coffee and wearing a satisfied expression. "Your ex-wife's social media has gotten interesting," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. She pulled up Simone's Instagram on her phone. The posts had transformed again. No more victim narratives or tearful confessions. Now it was yoga poses and motivational quotes about finding your authentic self and discovering empowerment through independence. The Pierce family was conspicuously absent from her new journey of self-discovery. "She's reinvented herself," Maya observed. "Again." Vincent glanced at the screen but felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just the neutral acknowledgement of someone who no longer had any stake in Simone's story. Maya scrolled through local real estate news on her tablet. The Pierce family lost the Baltimore condo. The mortgage application was rejected when the bank discovered the income documentation issues, and they couldn't qualify for alternative financing. She paused, looking up with raised eyebrows. "Word is that Gloria Pierce is facing fraud charges related to other mortgage applications. Apparently, you weren't their first target, just the one who fought back." The news felt distant, like hearing about events in another city, relevant to Vincent's past but no longer threatening to his present. His phone buzzed with an email notification. Vincent opened it to find official letterhead from a family law firm. The divorce had been finalized, all claims between the parties resolved according to the mediation agreement. The envelope also contained a small package. Inside was his original wedding ring and a handwritten note on simple stationery. Vincent recognized Simone's handwriting immediately. "Thank you for teaching me the difference between love and manipulation. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I hope you find someone who deserves the integrity you showed me, even when I didn't deserve it. S." Maya watched his face carefully. "You okay?" Vincent read the note once more, then filed it away with the other documents that marked transitions between chapters of his life.
"I'm okay. She learned something. That's more than I expected." The afternoon sun shifted through the office windows, casting long shadows across the financial reports and architectural plans that represented his rebuilt professional foundation. A potential client was coming at 3, a small business owner who'd been through a difficult partnership dissolution and needed advice on protecting assets going forward. Maya stood to leave but paused at the doorframe. "You know what I respect most about how you handled all this? You didn't try to destroy them. You just protected yourself and let their own choices catch up with them. That's the only way it works. Revenge means you're still connected to them. Protection means you're free." After Maya left, Vincent spent a few minutes looking at the harbor view. 5 months ago, his life had been falling apart in that parking garage. Now he was building something new, not bigger or flashier than before, just more honest, more carefully constructed on foundations he'd tested and verified himself. His phone chimed with a calendar reminder about the 3 o'clock meeting. Vincent gathered his materials and prepared to help someone else navigate the difficult process of protecting what they'd built from people who would exploit trust for personal gain. The work felt meaningful in a way his old practice never had. He wasn't just designing buildings anymore. He was teaching people how to build lives that couldn't be easily demolished by betrayal. As he organized the conference room for the meeting, Vincent realized he'd learned the most important lesson architecture had to teach. Strong foundations could weather any storm, but only if you built them right the first time and never compromised their integrity for the sake of appearances. The harbor outside continued its endless rhythm of ships arriving and departing, each one navigating carefully charted channels towards destinations they'd chosen for themselves. Vincent watched them for a moment, then turned back to the work of helping others chart their own safe passage through difficult waters.
6 months after the mediation, Vincent received an invitation to speak at the University of Pennsylvania's Architecture School. The topic: Building Professional Resilience, Lessons from Unexpected Challenges. He almost declined. The last thing he wanted was to publicly dissect his personal disaster for an audience of graduate students. But Maya convinced him otherwise. "You have something valuable to teach," she'd said. "Not just about protecting assets, but about protecting yourself without becoming the kind of person who destroyed you." The lecture hall was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 50 students scattered across tiered seating. Vincent stood at the podium feeling oddly nervous. Designing buildings was easier than designing narratives about your own failures and recoveries. "I'm going to tell you about the most important project I never built," he began. "A partnership that collapsed because I focused on the visible structure and ignored the foundations." He talked about trust without verification, about assuming shared values meant shared integrity, about the difference between collaboration and exploitation. He didn't mention Simone by name or go into the details of the divorce. Instead, he focused on the principles that saved him. "In architecture, we test our foundations before we build on them," Vincent said. "We verify load capacity, soil composition, structural integrity. But in business partnerships and personal relationships, we often skip those tests. We assume trust is enough." A student raised her hand. "But doesn't testing trust mean you don't actually trust the person?" Vincent considered the question carefully. Trust isn't blind faith. Trust is confidence based on demonstrated reliability over time. What I learned is that proper documentation, clear agreements, and verified accountability aren't the opposite of trust. They're the foundation that makes trust possible. The lecture ran over by 20 minutes because students kept asking questions. How do you know when to protect yourself? How do you rebuild after betrayal? How do you maintain integrity when others don't? Vincent answered honestly, drawing from experiences that still felt raw despite months of distance. The most meaningful work he'd done since the divorce wasn't designing buildings, it was helping other people avoid the mistakes he'd made. After the lecture, a young woman approached him. "My parents are going through something similar," she said quietly. "My mom's business partner has been stealing from their company for years. She just found out." Vincent pulled a business card from his wallet and wrote Rebecca Chen's contact information on the back. "Have your mother call this attorney. The sooner she documents everything, the better her chances of protecting what's left."
The student took the card with grateful eyes. "Thank you. She's been so overwhelmed she didn't know where to start." Start with documentation. Start with verification. Start with protecting the foundations before the entire structure collapses. Driving home that evening, Vincent thought about the difference between revenge and protection, between destruction and boundaries, between winning and simply refusing to lose everything. Simone had taught him an expensive lesson about the difference between love and strategic alliance. The Pierce family had taught him that some people viewed relationships as transactions to be exploited. The divorce had taught him that protecting yourself wasn't selfish, it was the foundation of respecting others. Because when you allow people to exploit you, you're teaching them that exploitation works. When you set clear boundaries and enforce consequences, you're teaching them that integrity matters. Vincent pulled into his driveway, not the brownstone he'd shared with Simone, but a smaller row house in a quieter neighborhood. A place he'd chosen carefully, purchased in his name alone, built on foundations he'd personally verified. Inside, he made dinner and reviewed plans for tomorrow's client meeting. A woman whose husband had been hiding assets in preparation for divorce. A small business owner whose partner wanted to dissolve their company under suspicious circumstances. People who needed someone who understood that protection wasn't paranoia, it was prudence. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Proud of you for the lecture. Dad would be proud too." Vincent smiled. His father had built a small construction company through integrity and careful planning, teaching Vincent that shortcuts always cost more in the long run. The same principles that made good architecture made good lives. Strong foundations, honest materials, and structures that could weather storms without compromising their core integrity. Before bed, Vincent stood at his window looking out at the Philadelphia skyline. Somewhere out there, Simone was probably posting another inspirational quote about self-discovery. The Pierce family was probably scheming their next venture. Devin was probably looking for another person to exploit. But Vincent was here, in a home he'd built carefully on foundations he'd tested himself. Not bitter, not broken, just free. The greatest lesson architecture had taught him wasn't about buildings at all. It was about knowing the difference between what looks solid and what actually is. About testing foundations before you build your life on them. About understanding that true strength comes from integrity, not from how much you can take from others. Vincent turned off the lights and went to bed, already planning tomorrow's work. Not revenge, not victory, just the steady, methodical process of helping people build lives that could withstand the inevitable storms that test every structure's true strength.
If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching.